The first crack wasn't just thunder, it was the sound of the sky tearing itself apart. I was in my penthouse office, 25 floors up in the Grand Vance, right in the heart of Atlanta, doing what I always did, trying to wrestle a spreadsheet into submission. One moment, the rain was just a gentle drum on the window. The next, a roaring beast hit the building with the force of a freight train. The world outside my window turned into a blur of green-grey chaos, trees bent at impossible angles, and then the air conditioning units on the roof directly above me groaned, a sound that went right through my bones. Before I could even stand, a violent shudder ripped through the building. The lights flickered, died, then came back on in a sickly yellow glow, illuminating the dust already raining down from the ceiling. A loud, sickening crunch echoed, and then the roof above me sounded like it was being peeled back like a sardine can. "What in God's name?" I whispered, my voice trembling. My mahogany desk lurched, sending my laptop skittering to the floor. Glass exploded from the panoramic window, sucking pictures and papers out into the raging wind before debris started flying in. I dove under the desk, my silk suit snagging on a splintered chair leg. Dust and plaster filled the air, thick and choking. I could hear alarms wailing somewhere below, muffled by the roar of the wind and the groan of tortured metal. I tried to crawl out, but a section of the ceiling had collapsed, blocking the door. My throat was dry, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I screamed, "Help! Is anyone there?" My voice sounded tiny, swallowed by the storm. Smoke, acrid and metallic, began to creep under the jammed door, stinging my eyes. Panic, cold and sharp, clawed its way up my throat. I, Eleanor Vance, CEO of a multi-million-dollar hospitality empire, was trapped. Just when I thought I was alone, a muffled thud echoed from the other side of the door. Then another, louder one. Someone was there. "Hello?" I croaked, my voice raw. "Mrs. Vance, it's Maria. Maria Rodriguez. Can you hear me?" Maria, the head maid. I remembered her. Always quiet, always efficient, always with that gentle smile. I'd seen her in the halls, sometimes in my own mansion. I'd always given her a nod, a brief acknowledgement, nothing more. Now her voice was a lifeline. "Maria! Yes! I'm trapped! The door's jammed!" I shouted back, coughing from the smoke. I heard grunts and the scrape of metal. "I'm trying, Mrs. Vance. It's really stuck." There was a mighty crash, and then, with a splintering groan, the heavy oak door finally gave way, pushed inward by sheer force. Maria stood there, covered in dust and sweat, her usually neat uniform torn, a bleeding scrape on her cheek. Her eyes, though, were wide with determination. "We have to go, Mrs. Vance. It's not safe." She grabbed my arm, her grip surprisingly strong, pulling me from under the desk. The hallway was a nightmare. Ceiling tiles scattered like autumn leaves, water pouring from burst pipes, and the thick smell of burning wires. Maria shielded me from falling debris, guiding me through the chaos with an almost primal instinct. She knew every inch of this hotel, every back staircase, every safe passage. We stumbled down 25 flights, Maria half carrying me at times, her resilience astounding. Finally, we emerged into the main lobby, which was a makeshift triage center. People were huddled together, some crying, some bandaged, all shell-shocked. Maria, soaked and shivering, pulled me gently towards a first aid station. "Mrs. Vance, you should get checked over," she insisted, her voice hoarse. "No, Maria, you first," I said, catching my breath, a profound gratitude washing over me. "You saved me." She shook her head, ever humble, but let a volunteer guide her to a chair. She looked utterly spent, her hair plastered to her forehead, dripping wet. As she leaned her head back, trying to catch her breath, her damp hair slipped from behind her ear. And that's when I saw it, clear as day, on the left side of her neck, just beneath the earlobe, a distinctive, butterfly-shaped birthmark. My breath hitched. For a second, the roar of the storm, the cries of the injured, the entire world faded away. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the wet clothes. Before I continue, drop a comment telling me where you're listening to this from. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now. You won't want to miss the ending. The first hint of morning in Eleanor Vance's mansion wasn't the sun, but the gentle hum of the automated blinds slowly rising, revealing the sprawling green expanse of her Atlanta estate. At 62, Eleanor had perfected the art of waking up alone. Her king-sized bed, piled with Egyptian cotton and silk, always felt too vast, too empty. She'd made millions, built an empire, and somehow built a gilded cage around her own heart. She slipped out from under the covers, her bare feet meeting the plush, deep pile of a Persian rug. Every morning, the same routine: a crisp linen robe, a silent walk to the ensuite bathroom where heated marble awaited. The mirror, framed in hand-carved cherry wood, reflected a woman meticulously put together even before the day began. Her silver hair, still with hints of its youthful blonde, was always coiffed just so. Her eyes, a sharp blue, held the weight of countless decisions and a stillness that spoke of long-held secrets. As she applied her moisturizer, she caught a glimpse of her reflection, not in the eyes, but lower down, at her neck. She had a faded, butterfly-shaped birthmark there, just beneath her left earlobe. It was a faint echo of a deeper, more vibrant mark from long ago, almost hidden by time and the way she styled her hair or draped her scarves. Without thinking, her fingers, adorned with a single, tasteful diamond ring, briefly brushed the spot, a familiar, unconscious gesture. It was a place she instinctively covered, a tiny part of herself she'd learned to forget, to make invisible. Downstairs, her kitchen, a marvel of stainless steel and polished granite, was already sparkling. Eleanor preferred to make her own coffee, a ritual of control in a world she often felt was slipping just beyond her grasp. The aroma of freshly ground beans filled the air, a small comfort. She carried her mug, steaming and perfect, to the breakfast nook, a glass-enclosed space overlooking a meticulously manicured rose garden. She pulled out her phone, not for news or stock market updates, but for something else, something she rarely admitted even to herself. Her fingers scrolled past emails from hotel managers, alerts from her financial advisors, and landed on her messages. Nothing from Thomas, her eldest. A generic forwarded meme from Sarah, her youngest, sent to a group chat. The last actual message from either of them, asking for a loan for a startup opportunity, had been 2 weeks ago. The screen's glow reflected in her eyes, showing a flicker of something she quickly suppressed. A pang of disappointment. A familiar ache of being needed for her resources, never for her presence. Eleanor sighed, a soft, almost inaudible sound. All this success, all this luxury, and the silence in her mansion could sometimes be deafening. She spent her days commanding boardrooms, making deals worth millions, her word law in her vast hospitality empire. She was respected, feared even, but rarely, if ever, truly seen or loved. Her children were grown, living their own distant, complicated lives, beneficiaries of her hard work, but strangers to her heart. She often wondered if she'd poured so much of herself into building her empire that there was nothing left for anything else or anyone else. She took another sip of her coffee, the warmth a fleeting comfort against the cold truth of her solitude. Today was a busy day at the Grand Vance, the flagship hotel. There would be meetings, tough decisions, and endless demands on her time. She would immerse herself in it, just like always. Work was her purpose, her identity, and her shield. It filled the void, if only for a little while. Pushing away the quiet melancholy, she rose from the table, straightening her shoulders. Time to face the day, to be Eleanor Vance, CEO. She had a whole world to run. The alarm on Maria's phone, a gentle melody that always felt too loud, pulled her from a dream of laughter. She blinked awake in the dim light of her small apartment, a familiar comfort despite its worn edges. The worn floral curtains, bought years ago from a second-hand store, barely held back the pre-dawn glow over her working-class Atlanta neighborhood. At 40, Maria had learned to wake before the sun, before the world truly stirred, to find a moment of peace before the rush. Next to her, 6-year-old Sophia was already stirring in the bed she shared with her older brother, Matteo, who at 8 usually needed a gentle nudge. Maria smiled, a quiet warmth spreading through her chest. This was her wealth, her treasures, sleeping soundly beside her. She carefully eased herself off the narrow mattress, the springs groaning a familiar tune. The floorboards creaked underfoot as she padded to the tiny kitchen, where the coffee maker was already set for its morning brew. The smell of coffee mingled with the faint scent of cinnamon from yesterday's bread, a smell that felt like home. "Buenos dias, mi amor," she whispered, leaning over to kiss Matteo's forehead. He mumbled, already half awake, and Sophia giggled, pulling the blanket up to her chin. This was the chaotic symphony of her mornings, a stark contrast to the quiet elegance of Mrs. Vance's mansion, where she sometimes cleaned. Here, every space was lived in, loved in, every corner holding a memory. Breakfast was a flurry of activity, oatmeal bubbling on the stove, toast popping, milk pouring. Maria moved with practiced efficiency, her hands a blur. "Matteo, did you check your backpack for your spelling test?" she asked, already packing Sophia's lunchbox with apple slices and a peanut butter sandwich. Matteo, his dark hair falling into his eyes, nodded, chewing slowly. "Yes, Mama." Sophia, ever the chatterbox, recounted a dream about a flying cat. Maria listened, truly listened, her heart full, offering gentle responses as she moved between them. After the children were dressed in their school uniforms, Maria went to get ready herself. She pulled on her neat dark blue uniform, the crisp fabric a symbol of her pride in her work at the Grand Vance. She worked hard, sometimes picking up extra shifts at Mrs. Vance's big house, because every dollar mattered, every penny was for her children's future. She needed to save for their education, for a bigger apartment, for the countless small things that made up a life. Standing before the small speckled mirror above her sink, Maria gathered her long dark hair. She twisted it into a tight bun, securing it with pins. It was easier to work that way, keeping it out of her face. As she pulled the last stray wisps back, the distinctive butterfly-shaped birthmark on the left side of her neck, just beneath the earlobe, became clearly visible. Her fingers briefly brushed the spot, a familiar unconscious gesture. It was a unique mark, the only physical clue she had, mentioned in a single faded letter from her adoptive mother about her birth. A quiet sigh escaped her lips. Sometimes, when she was alone like this, the old yearning returned. A fleeting thought of the woman who had given her life, the mother she had never known. Who was she? Did she have Maria's eyes, Matteo's quick wit? The questions were always there, a soft ache in her heart, but she never let them linger. There was no time for dwelling. Her children needed her. Her work called. She shook her head gently, pushing the thought away. Her children, her vibrant life here, was what mattered. As she grabbed her worn purse and keys, the cheerful voices of Sophia and Matteo calling, "Bye, Mama, have a good day," filled the small apartment. She blew them a kiss, a wide smile on her face. Her community, her faith, her children. This was her world, rich in love, even if it was light on luxury. She stepped out into the bustling morning, ready for another day. The Grand Vance was a hive of activity, even on a Tuesday afternoon, but in my penthouse office, it was a world away. I sat at my massive cherrywood desk, the city skyline stretching out beyond the bulletproof glass, a kingdom laid out at my feet. On my screen, numbers scrolled, revenue projections, cost analyses, employee expenses. Every penny counted, especially with the upcoming expansion into Charleston. Decisions had to be made, hard ones, to ensure the Vance Hospitality Group stayed ahead. I leaned back, a slight frown creasing my forehead. The quarterly reports weren't quite where I wanted them. Too many small expenditures adding up. My gaze drifted to the line item for employee amenities, staff cafeteria. A small thing, really, but it had grown. Free hot lunch, 4 days a week, for all hourly staff. It was a long-standing tradition, started by my father, a vestige of a softer era. But times changed. Businesses adapted. "It's just not sustainable, Mr. Davies," I murmured to my vice president of operations, who sat across from me, his tablet open. "That adds up to nearly $100,000 a year across all properties. We can introduce a subsidized meal program, maybe a voucher system for local delis, or even just offer discounted cold options. But the full hot meal 4 times a week, it has to go." Mr. Davies nodded, ever compliant. "Understood, Mrs. Vance. I'll draft the memo immediately. We can present it as a streamlining of services to better align with current economic realities." He always knew how to package unpleasant news. "Exactly," I said, feeling a familiar satisfaction. It was a purely business decision. Necessary. Logical. Small details like this made a difference to the bottom line. It wasn't about being cruel. It was about being smart. Later that afternoon, I was reviewing blueprints for the new spa wing when there was a soft knock on my door. "Come in," I called, not looking up. Maria Rodriguez stepped in, her neat uniform perfectly pressed, a slight nervousness in her usually steady eyes. She held a folded piece of paper in her hands. "Mrs. Vance, do you have a moment?" I sighed internally. Another request, another complaint. "Yes, Maria, what is it?" I kept my tone even, professional. She took a breath, her voice soft but firm. "Mrs. Vance, I just read the memo about the staff cafeteria, the change to the meal program." She gestured with the paper. "My team, the other housekeepers, the kitchen staff, the groundskeepers, we're all very concerned. That free hot lunch, it's a big help for many of us. For families, for single parents, it means one less meal we have to worry about buying or packing, one less expense. It makes a real difference." I finally looked up, meeting her gaze across the expanse of my office. Her earnestness was almost admirable, if misplaced. "Maria, I understand your concern, but this was a necessary business decision. We're facing new economic realities, and we need to optimize our operational efficiency. It's a small change in the grand scheme of things, but it allows us to redirect funds to other areas that will ultimately benefit the company, and thus, all our employees in the long run." She took a step closer, her hands clasped. "But Mrs. Vance, it's not a small change for us. Many of us rely on that meal. After a full morning of cleaning rooms, a hot meal, cooked here, it helps us keep going. It feels like a small dignity, a recognition of our hard work. We work long hours. Some of us take 2 buses to get here. Saving a few dollars on lunch adds up over a month." I felt a flicker of impatience. She was well-meaning, I supposed, but she just didn't grasp the bigger picture. "Maria, I appreciate your perspective, and I do value your team's hard work. But the decision has been made. The new subsidized voucher program will be in effect starting next month. It's a fair compromise." I paused, softening my tone slightly, as if explaining to a child. "Think of it this way. A stronger hotel means more stable jobs for everyone. Sometimes we have to make small sacrifices for the greater good." She stood there for a moment, her shoulders slumping just a fraction. Her eyes, usually so bright, looked a little defeated. "Yes, Mrs. Vance," she finally said, her voice barely a whisper. She nodded once, a small, polite dip of her head, and turned to leave. As the door clicked shut behind her, I immediately turned back to my blueprints. The conversation was already fading from my mind. A minor disruption, swiftly dealt with. It was just business, nothing personal. I moved on, my mind already calculating the new spa's potential revenue, the minor cafeteria savings already absorbed into the vast, impersonal spreadsheet of my empire. The last of the executive team had left an hour ago, their footsteps echoing faintly down the hushed corridors of the Grand Vance. Now, only the soft hum of the building systems and the distant whir of cleaning machines broke the silence in Eleanor Vance's penthouse office. Outside, the Atlanta skyline twinkled, a vast, indifferent canvas of light. She sat at her desk, the laptop lid finally closed, a single lamp casting a warm circle over a stack of industry magazines she had no real interest in reading. Eleanor leaned back in her ergonomic chair, a sigh escaping her lips. The day's sharp edges had softened into a dull ache. She'd spent hours wrestling with projections, making calls, steering her empire. It was what she did. It was who she was. Yet, in these late hours, when the power suits were off and the demanding voices silenced, a familiar emptiness would creep in. Her children were busy, her friends were mostly business acquaintances, and her sprawling mansion felt more like a museum than a home. She ran a hand across her temples, a faint tension headache beginning to throb. As her fingers brushed the side of her neck, she instinctively adjusted her pearl necklace, a gesture that subtly shifted her elegant scarf, revealing for a fleeting moment the slightly faded butterfly-shaped birthmark just beneath her left earlobe. It was a habit, an unconscious way to keep something hidden, even from herself. She'd long ago trained herself not to think about it, not to remember. She picked up her phone, scrolling through contacts, pausing on Thomas, then Sarah. No, it was too late. They wouldn't want to call just to chat. They'd assume she wanted something, or worse, that she was lonely. The thought stung, a familiar wound. She put the phone down, the screen dark, reflecting her solitary face. There was a faint rumble of thunder in the distance, a sound she barely registered, so used was she to the city's ceaseless background noise. She simply watched the lights, her kingdom, feeling like a queen without a court. Down on the 10th floor, Maria Rodriguez pushed her cleaning cart towards the service elevator, the last suite on her roster sparkling behind her. Her shift was finally over. Her back ached a little, her feet throbbed, but a quiet satisfaction settled over her. Another day, another honest day's work. As the elevator doors opened, she saw a couple of other housekeepers, their faces tired but relieved, waiting to head down. "Buenas noches, Maria," one of them said, a friendly smile. "Buenas noches," Maria replied, her own smile genuine. They chatted briefly about the long day, about the kids they were rushing home to see. The conversation drifted to the memo about the cafeteria, the one she'd tried to talk to Mrs. Vance about. "I still can't believe it," one said, shaking her head. "That hot meal really helped. Now, it's just more to worry about." Maria nodded, a quiet sadness in her eyes. "I know. I tried to speak to her, but, well, you know Mrs. Vance." Her voice held no bitterness, just a quiet resignation. Eleanor Vance was a boss, a powerful woman, from a different world. It was naive to think she'd understand what a hot lunch meant to them. Maria had even briefly wondered if it was time to look for a different job, maybe one closer to home, with better benefits for families. But jobs like this, with steady pay and good hours, were hard to come by. She had to think of Matteo and Sophia. And since you've made it this far, go ahead and hit that like button. It really helps me keep bringing stories like this. She untied the apron from her waist, folding it neatly. Then she pulled out a small, worn brush from her purse and swept it through her hair, gathering the strands to retie them in a looser ponytail for her bus ride home. As she swept her hair up, the distinctive, butterfly-shaped birthmark on the left side of her neck, just beneath the earlobe, was clearly visible in the fluorescent lights of the service corridor. She traced it unconsciously with her finger, a familiar private gesture. Her adoptive mother had always told her it was a special mark, a little secret from the universe. Maria glanced at the clock on the wall. Almost 9 p.m. She needed to get home, to check on Matteo's homework, to read Sophia a bedtime story. The thought of her children was a warm balm, chasing away the fatigue and the small worries of the day. As she stepped into the elevator, she looked up towards the top floor, a silhouette of power and distant light against the dark sky. She often wondered what it was like to live up there in Mrs. Vance's world. It felt a million miles away. The elevator doors hissed shut, carrying her down, away from the isolated world above. The first crack wasn't just thunder, it was the sound of the sky tearing itself apart. I was in my penthouse office, 25 floors up in the Grand Vance, right in the heart of Atlanta, doing what I always did, trying to wrestle a spreadsheet into submission. One moment, the rain was just a gentle drum on the window. The next, a roaring beast hit the building with the force of a freight train. The world outside my window turned into a blur of green-grey chaos. Trees bent at impossible angles, and then the air conditioning units on the roof directly above me groaned, a sound that went right through my bones. Before I could even stand, a violent shudder ripped through the building. The lights flickered, died, then came back on in a sickly yellow glow, illuminating the dust already raining down from the ceiling. A loud, sickening crunch echoed, and then the roof above me sounded like it was being peeled back like a sardine can. "What in God's name?" I whispered, my voice trembling. My mahogany desk lurched, sending my laptop skittering to the floor. Glass exploded from the panoramic window, sucking pictures and papers out into the raging wind before debris started flying in. I dove under the desk, my silk suit snagging on a splintered chair leg. Dust and plaster filled the air, thick and choking. I could hear alarms wailing somewhere below, muffled by the roar of the wind and the groan of tortured metal. I tried to crawl out, but a section of the ceiling had collapsed, blocking the door. My throat was dry, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I screamed, "Help! Is anyone there?" My voice sounded tiny, swallowed by the storm. Smoke, acrid and metallic, began to creep under the jammed door, stinging my eyes. Panic, cold and sharp, clawed its way up my throat. I, Eleanor Vance, CEO of a multi-million-dollar hospitality empire, was trapped. Just when I thought I was alone, a muffled thud echoed from the other side of the door. Then another, louder one. Someone was there. "Hello?" I croaked, my voice raw. "Mrs. Vance? It's Maria Rodriguez. Can you hear me?" Maria, the head maid. I remembered her. Always quiet, always efficient, always with that gentle smile. I'd seen her in the halls, sometimes in my own mansion. I'd always given her a nod, a brief acknowledgement, nothing more. Now, her voice was a lifeline. "Maria, yes, I'm trapped. The door's jammed!" I shouted back, coughing from the smoke. I heard grunts and the scrape of metal. "I'm trying, Mrs. Vance. It's really stuck." There was a mighty crash, and then, with a splintering groan, the heavy oak door finally gave way, pushed inward by sheer force. Maria stood there, covered in dust and sweat, her usually neat uniform torn, a bleeding scrape on her cheek. Her eyes, though, were wide with determination. "We have to go, Mrs. Vance. It's not safe." She grabbed my arm, her grip surprisingly strong, pulling me from under the desk. The hallway was a nightmare. Ceiling tiles scattered like autumn leaves, water pouring from burst pipes, and the thick smell of burning wires. Maria shielded me from falling debris, guiding me through the chaos with an almost primal instinct. She knew every inch of this hotel, every back staircase, every safe passage. We stumbled down 25 flights, Maria half carrying me at times, her resilience astounding. Finally, we emerged into the main lobby, which was a makeshift triage center. People were huddled together, some crying, some bandaged, all shell-shocked. Maria, soaked and shivering, pulled me gently towards a first aid station. "Mrs. Vance, you should get checked over," she insisted, her voice hoarse. "No, Maria, you first," I said, catching my breath, a profound gratitude washing over me. "You saved me." She shook her head, ever humble, but let a volunteer guide her to a chair. She looked utterly spent, her hair plastered to her forehead, dripping wet. As she leaned her head back, trying to catch her breath, her damp hair slipped from behind her ear. And that's when I saw it, clear as day, on the left side of her neck, just beneath the earlobe, a distinctive, butterfly-shaped birthmark. My breath hitched. For a second, the roar of the storm, the cries of the injured, the entire world, faded away. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the wet clothes. Before I continue, drop a comment telling me where you're listening to this from. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now. You won't want to miss the ending. The makeshift triage center in the Grand Vance lobby buzzed with frantic energy. But for me, the world had narrowed to that single, impossible sight. The butterfly-shaped birthmark on the left side of Maria's neck, just beneath her earlobe. It was exactly like mine. My breath caught in my chest, and a cold dread, deeper than any fear the storm had inspired, began to spread through me. It wasn't just a random birthmark. It was the birthmark, the one I'd long hidden, the one I'd spent decades forgetting. I tried to shake the feeling, to rationalize it away. A coincidence. Nothing more. But my heart was pounding a frantic rhythm, a drumbeat of sudden, unwelcome memory fragments, a sterile hospital room, hushed voices, a fleeting glimpse of a tiny red-faced infant, a doctor's calm, detached voice mentioning a unique birthmark before they took her away. I pushed the memories back, hard, just as I'd always done. Suddenly, a team of paramedics swarmed Maria. Her eyes were fluttering, her body slumping. "She's got a head injury, possibly internal bleeding from the impact," a gruff voice barked. "Get her to St. Jude's now." Panic, sharp and unfamiliar, lanced through me. Maria, injured. But she had just saved my life. I had barely acknowledged her for years, just a face in the hotel, a shadow in my mansion. Why did this sudden fear for her feel so visceral? "Wait," I heard myself say, my voice surprisingly strong despite my inner turmoil. "I'm Eleanor Vance. She works for me. What's her condition?" A young paramedic juggling a clipboard barely glanced at me. "Ma'am, we're stabilizing her. She needs an ER immediately." They carefully lifted Maria onto a stretcher, her face pale, a trickle of blood drying near her temple. "Which hospital?" I demanded, moving closer, ignoring the chaos around me. "I want updates. I'll arrange for a private room, the best care." My own operations manager, Mr. Davies, who had just found me, looked utterly bewildered. "Mrs. Vance, are you all right? We have a car waiting to take you home. The hotel needs your attention, but you need to rest." "I'm fine," I snapped, my gaze fixed on Maria as they wheeled her past me. "No, Mr. Davies, I'm going to St. Jude's. Call my driver and inform them at the hospital that I expect full updates on Maria Rodriguez's condition. Top priority." Mr. Davies just stared, his mouth slightly agape. He'd never seen me react like this to an employee, certainly not to a head maid. My usual protocol would be a quick "ensure she receives good care" message passed down the chain, then back to business. But something had shifted. A powerful, unnameable pull was drawing me to Maria, an urgency I couldn't deny. At St. Jude's, the emergency room was a cacophony of beeping machines and hushed medical talk. I sat in a sterile waiting room, still in my dust-streaked silk suit, feeling utterly out of place. My driver, William, had offered to take me home, but I couldn't leave. Not yet. I kept asking the nurses at the desk for updates. "Maria Rodriguez. Has she been seen by a doctor? Is she stable?" They gave me vague answers, reassuring me she was being assessed. Hours crawled by. The initial shock of the storm began to wear off, replaced by a growing anxiety. Why did I care so much? This was just Maria, a hard-working employee, but when I closed my eyes, I kept seeing that birthmark, glowing on her pale skin, an exact match to the one I'd spent a lifetime trying to ignore on my own neck. Finally, a harried-looking doctor, a woman with kind eyes, approached me. "Mrs. Vance, Maria Rodriguez is stable. She has a concussion and some deep bruises, but thankfully, no internal bleeding. She's going to need rest, but she'll recover." A wave of relief washed over me, so potent it left me trembling. Can I see her?" I asked, the words surprising even myself. The doctor hesitated. "She's very weak, and she's being monitored. But yes, for a moment." They led me to a quiet room. Maria lay in the bed, pale and still, an IV drip in her arm. Her dark hair was loose now, fanned out on the pillow, and as I stepped closer, my heart lurched. Her head was turned slightly, and there it was again, unmistakable. The distinctive, butterfly-shaped birthmark on the left side of her neck, just beneath the earlobe. It seemed to pulse with a silent question. My fingers went to my own neck, brushing the faded mark beneath my ear. The recognition was no longer inexplicable. It was terrifyingly clear. A cold knot formed in my stomach. The memories that had been suppressed for decades began to claw their way to the surface, demanding to be heard. This wasn't just a maid. This wasn't just a coincidence. This was something far, far deeper. I stared at Maria's still face, her quiet strength, and then back at that indelible mark, and the world tilted on its axis. I stood there, frozen, the sterile hospital room strangely silent, despite the faint hum of machines. Maria lay still in the bed, her face pale, her dark hair fanned out against the white pillow. But all I could see, all I could feel, was that butterfly-shaped birthmark on the left side of her neck, just beneath the earlobe. It was an exact mirror image of my own, a mark I had spent a lifetime trying to erase from my memory, to hide with scarves and high collars, to forget. The air in the room felt heavy, thick with the unsaid, the unknown, and the terrifyingly known. My own fingers instinctively went to my neck, tracing the faded outline of my birthmark. The memory wasn't just clawing its way back now, it was crashing through the floodgates I'd built so carefully, so brutally, decades ago. A young Eleanor, ambitious and terrified of scandal, in a small, hushed clinic. The searing pain, the distant cries, the doctor's solemn voice explaining the adoption, mentioning a unique birthmark as a detail for the records, a fleeting, guilt-ridden glimpse of a tiny, red-faced infant. Then the desperate urge to forget, to build a future free from that past. My knees felt weak, and I slumped into the chair beside Maria's bed, my eyes still locked on that undeniable mark. Grief, sharp and sudden, pierced through the years of icy control. Grief for a life I never knew, for a child I'd given away, for a past I'd buried alive. Guilt, a crushing weight, pressed down on me. How many times had I seen Maria in the hotel? How many times in my own mansion? Dismissed her, ignored her, made a purely business decision that would affect her family. The sheer arrogance of my blindness. A soft knock interrupted my torturous thoughts. A kind-faced nurse entered, holding a clipboard. "Mrs. Vance, I'm just here to update Maria's chart. We need to confirm a few details for her medical history, especially with the concussion." I barely registered her words. Her medical history. My voice was hoarse. Yes, we have her basic intake, but sometimes with a head injury, knowing any family history or any distinguishing marks can be important. The nurse paused, her eyes falling on the birthmark on Maria's neck. "Ah, I see we've noted this here. A very distinctive butterfly-shaped birthmark. Quite beautiful, actually." She made a small check on her clipboard. "Do you know if any other family members share this particular mark, Mrs. Vance? It's a genetic marker. Sometimes it runs in families." My heart stopped. The nurse's casual question, intended for routine medical protocol, landed like a thunderbolt. "Yes," I whispered, the word barely audible. My hand, trembling, went up to my own neck, pulling my scarf aside, revealing my own faded, butterfly-shaped birthmark. The nurse's eyes widened, first in surprise, then in dawning comprehension. She looked from Maria's neck to mine, then back to her chart, her brow furrowed in a moment of professional analysis that quickly turned to quiet shock. "Well, I've never seen one quite so identical," she murmured, a hint of awe in her voice. She quickly scanned Maria's intake form again, her finger tracing a line. "And it says here, Maria's adoptive parents noted her biological mother's name was Eleanor, and that she had a similar, unique mark, though details were sparse due to the confidential adoption." The words hung in the air, solidifying the impossible. Eleanor. My name. My mark. Maria. My daughter. The pieces slammed together with a horrifying, undeniable clarity. The room began to spin, not from the storm, but from the dizzying, crushing weight of truth, the casual disregard, the cold business decisions, the years of simply not seeing her. She had saved my life, and I had nearly ruined hers, not knowing she was the lost piece of my soul, the daughter I had abandoned. My vision blurred, not from tears yet, but from the sheer force of the revelation. The nurse, sensing the shift in the air, discreetly backed away, leaving me alone with the impossible, devastating truth. Maria, my daughter, lay before me, her life's journey intertwining with mine in the most unexpected and painful way. All these years, she was right here, cleaning my hotel, even my home, while I lived in my gilded cage, blind to the true, hidden tie. I stepped into Maria's hospital room, the scent of antiseptic sharp in the air, a stark contrast to the luxurious perfumes of my world. The fluorescent lights hummed, casting a pale glow on everything. Maria lay still in the bed, an IV drip near her head, her face pale against the white pillow. Her dark hair, still damp in places, fanned around her, and there it was, clear as day, the butterfly-shaped birthmark on the left side of her neck, just beneath the earlobe. It felt like a beacon, drawing my gaze, demanding my attention. I closed the door softly behind me, the click echoing in the quiet room. I wasn't Eleanor Vance, CEO, in that moment. My elegant suit felt heavy, soiled, a costume for a life that suddenly seemed a hollow sham. I was just a woman, stripped bare by a truth more devastating than any storm. The empire I'd built, the millions I'd amassed, none of it mattered here. All that mattered was the warm, breathing woman in the bed, the woman I had dismissed, ignored, and whose life I had unknowingly impacted so carelessly. The woman who was my daughter. I walked to the bedside, my footsteps muffled by the quiet. My throat was tight, my hands clenched. I looked at her, truly looked at her, for the first time in her life. Her strong hands, calloused from work, resting on the blanket. The faint lines around her eyes, etched there by worry and love, no doubt for her own children. She was beautiful, resilient, everything I wasn't, everything I had lost the chance to be. Maria stirred, her eyelids fluttering open slowly. Her eyes, a warm, deep brown, met mine. There was confusion there, and a quiet recognition. "Mrs. Vance," she whispered, her voice raspy, a hint of pain in it. What happened?" My heart ached. She was asking about the storm, not the storm that had just broken inside me. "The storm, Maria," I managed, my voice rough. "You were hurt. You saved my life." She tried to push herself up, wincing. "I'm okay, Mrs. Vance. Just a headache." Her gaze drifted to my face, then lower, to my neck, where my scarf was still dislodged from my earlier panic. Her eyes widened a fraction. For a split second, I saw a flicker of something in them. Surprise, curiosity, a dawning question. I knew she saw it. My own faded, butterfly-shaped birthmark. It was like a mirror, the shared identifier, the silent witness to a truth I had tried to bury. "Maria," I began, my voice barely a whisper, thick with emotions I hadn't allowed myself to feel in decades. I have to tell you something." The words felt heavy, each one a stone, tumbling from a wall I'd spent a lifetime building. "That mark on your neck." My hand trembled as I pointed to it, then to my own. "I have one too, an identical one." Maria stared at me, her brow furrowed, her breathing shallow. She didn't speak, just watched, her gaze moving between the two marks. I knew she was putting the pieces together, just as I had. But for her, the pieces might have been fewer, the questions more desperate. She had been searching, a quiet ache in her heart for the birth mother she never knew, a name and a vague detail about a unique mark her adoptive parents had shared. And now, here I was. In 1983, I forced myself to continue, the words tasting like ash. I was young, ambitious, so afraid of losing everything I was working for. I made a terrible, unforgivable mistake. I gave you up. For adoption. I never even held you. I was told you went to a good family. And I tried. I tried to forget. Tears, hot and shameful, finally spilled down my cheeks, blurring Maria's face. My voice cracked. But I never did. Not really. I just buried it so deep, I stopped seeing it, even when it was right in front of me. Maria's face, already pale, lost even more color. Her eyes, fixed on mine, filled with a complex mixture of shock, pain, and a raw, vulnerable understanding. There was no anger yet, just a profound, shattering realization. The woman who had given her a small, kind nod in the hallways, the woman whose opulent mansion she sometimes cleaned, the woman she had just saved from certain death, was her mother. The class wall, built of wealth and poverty, of power and subservience, crumbled into dust. It was gone, replaced by blood, by history, by a shared mark of destiny. I reached out, my hand hovering uncertainly over hers, scared to touch her, scared she would pull away. "Maria," I pleaded, my voice choked with regret. "Can you ever forgive me?" If this story moved you, subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share it with someone who needs to hear this today. Your support is what brings these stories to more people.